This rifle was never meant to be carried by one person. It was designed to tear apart machines, aircraft, concrete, not bodies. But once it left the factory and entered real wars, its purpose began to shift in ways no one fully controlled. From battlefields to deserts, from military units to criminal hands, its reach kept expanding. What began as a technical experiment quietly rewrote the limits of distance, power, and responsibility. And the consequences did not stay in the past. They are still unfolding across borders, across societies, and across the idea of who should ever be allowed to wield this much force. To understand how that happened, we have to start long before the rifle itself existed. This story does not begin with a rifle. It begins with a shift in warfare when soldiers stopped fighting only other soldiers and started fighting machines. By the final years of World War I, armor, aircraft, and reinforced positions were rendering standard rifle rounds obsolete. In 1917, John Browning responded by scaling up his machine gun designs. Infantry calibers lacked the mass and energy to disable engines or punch through hardened targets. What emerged was a new cartridge built not for precision, but for destruction. The 50 caliber Browning machine gun round carried a bullet weighing around 650 grains. Its muzzle energy reached up to 15,000 foot-pounds, several times greater than conventional rifle cartridges. This was a projectile designed to tear through metal, concrete, and aircraft skin. Paired with the M2 heavy machine gun, the round became a cornerstone of 20th century warfare. It was mounted, crew-served, and deliberately separated from individual soldiers. Its power was tolerated because it was restrained by weight and doctrine. No one imagined this cartridge being carried by a single person. No one imagined it becoming a tool of individual marksmanship. But the potential was already there, waiting for someone willing to cross a line that had never been challenged. For decades, that line remained intact. The 50 caliber round stayed where doctrine said it belonged, mounted on heavy machine guns, far removed from the idea of precision shooting. Its weight alone made it impractical for anything else. Then, in Vietnam, that assumption cracked. In 1967, a Marine sniper demonstrated that this cartridge could do something no one expected. Using a scoped M2 machine gun, he fired at a target over 2,400 yards away. The shot was not clean or elegant. The first round struck a bicycle loaded with ammunition. The second hit the man who stood up beside it, collapsing him instantly. For the next 35 years, it remained the longest confirmed sniper kill in history. What mattered was not the record. It was the implication. At extreme distances, the 50 caliber was not just powerful, it was precise. But the demonstration came with an obvious limitation. An 84-pound machine gun, strapped with a scope, sandbags, and a tripod, was not a weapon a single soldier could carry into combat. The accuracy existed, but the platform did not. The idea lingered quietly after the war. If this cartridge could be fired accurately at such distances, what would happen if someone built a weapon around that fact? Not a mounted gun, not a crew-served system, but a rifle carried and operated by one person. That question remained unanswered, until someone outside the world of military engineering decided to ask it seriously. The answer did not come from a defense contractor or a military laboratory. It came from someone with no formal engineering background and no position inside the weapons industry. Ronnie Barrett was a professional photographer who simply liked firearms and spent time around them. During a commercial shoot on Percy Priest Lake, he was photographing a patrol boat prototype. Mounted on its deck were twin 50 caliber machine guns. Watching them, Barrett began thinking about the cartridge itself, not as a mounted weapon, but as something that could be controlled by a single person. He mentioned the idea of building a bolt-action 50 caliber rifle to a friend. The response was dismissive. If anything was possible, the real challenge would be making it semi-automatic. Barrett accepted that challenge immediately. With no training in mechanical design, he sketched his ideas by hand on newsprint paper. When he brought the drawings to machine shops, he was repeatedly turned away. The message was always the same. If this idea made sense, someone more qualified would have already done it. Eventually, a small group agreed to help. They worked out of a garage, learning through trial and error. After 4 months, they produced something that could be called a prototype. It was crude. It weighed nearly 50 pounds. It malfunctioned constantly, but it fired. The breakthrough came from how the rifle handled recoil. Instead of resisting it, the design absorbed it. When fired, the barrel recoiled backward while still locked to the bolt, bleeding off energy before the action opened. An accelerator arm transferred that energy to the bolt, unlocking it through a curved cam path. The spent case was extracted, a new round chambered from a 10-round magazine, and the cycle repeated. A large dual-chamber muzzle brake vented gas sideways, reducing felt recoil by roughly 70%. Combined with the rifle's mass, buffer springs, and recoil pad, the force dropped to a level a human could tolerate. What decades of conventional thinking had dismissed as impossible was now real. A shoulder-fired semi-automatic rifle chambered in 50 BMG. In 1982, the design received its designation, the M82. At that moment, a boundary that had held for nearly a century was gone. Turning an idea into a weapon was one thing. Getting the world to accept it was another. The first production run made that painfully clear. Barrett built 30 rifles by hand. It took 9 months, and each one cost around $8,000 to manufacture. They sold for less than a third of that. The second batch lost money as well. Only the third run finally broke even. The turning point did not come from a formal trial or public demonstration. It came from a small advertisement in Shotgun News. Someone inside the intelligence community noticed it. Soon after, orders were placed to supply Afghan Mujahideen fighters resisting the Soviet occupation. The arrangement was never officially acknowledged. But in mountainous terrain, where helicopters and equipment were often more valuable targets than infantry, the rifle proved ideal. This was how the weapon found its identity, not as a sniper rifle in the traditional sense, but as an anti-material tool. Its purpose was to destroy vehicles, equipment, and hardened positions from distances that conventional weapons could not reach. In 1989, Sweden became the first nation to formally adopt it. 100 rifles were ordered. Then on August 2, 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait. As coalition forces prepared for deployment, the United States Marine Corps ordered 125 ML-82A1 rifles. Production scaled up rapidly. Fewer than a dozen employees worked nearly non-stop from a small building behind Barrett's house. The rifles reached the battlefield just in time for Operation Desert Storm. There, their impact was immediate. Light armored vehicles and technicals could be disabled from extreme range. Targets beyond 2,000 yards were no longer safe. Other uses quickly followed. Norwegian units used the rifle to detonate landmines and unexploded ordnance from a distance. The 50 BMG round easily triggered even thick-walled artillery shells and aircraft bombs. By the end of the war, the rifle had proven itself. It was lighter than mounted weapons, more flexible than missiles, and devastatingly effective. War had given it legitimacy, and with that legitimacy, its spread accelerated. But during Desert Storm, something else became clear. Something that had nothing to do with vehicles or equipment. Something that hinted at a far more troubling role. Extreme range changes the nature of a decision. At close distances, action and consequence feel connected. At kilometers apart, they begin to separate. Wind, gravity, and time insert themselves between intent and outcome. The shooter acts. The result arrives seconds later. In April 2004, in Iraq, a Marine scout sniper named Steve Reich was positioned on top of an abandoned oil storage tank. From that height, he observed a familiar pattern of the conflict. An improvised explosive device hidden inside the carcass of a dead animal. When an explosive disposal team approached, insurgents launched an ambush. Rocket-propelled grenades, machine gun fire, a trap closing fast. Reich identified an enemy machine gunner at roughly 1,600 meters, nearly a mile away. His first shot missed. At that distance, a miss is not failure. It is information. He adjusted for wind and elevation. The second shot killed the target. Moments later, the engagement shifted. Reich spotted 3 insurgents moving up a staircase behind a building. They disappeared behind a brick wall. Direct line of sight was gone. In conventional sniper doctrine, the fight would have ended there. But the Barrett did not respect conventional limits. Using Mk211 multi-purpose rounds, Reich aimed at estimated positions behind the wall. The rounds penetrated the brick. Behind it, he observed red splashes. The wall was no longer cover. It was an illusion. Over the next 13 hours, Reich killed 9 insurgents. Some of them he never saw directly. They existed only as calculations: distance, material, angle. For that action, he was awarded the Bronze Star. The engagement demonstrated something deeply unsettling. The rifle did not merely extend range, it erased barriers. Cover became conditional. Concealment became irrelevant. Even visibility lost its authority. In January 2008 in Afghanistan, Army Specialist Nicholas Randstad encountered a different version of the same reality. He was resting at Checkpoint Delta when his spotter woke him. 4 Taliban fighters were observed at approximately 2,100 meters, beyond the adjustable range of his scope. At that distance, the solution was not mechanical, it was mental. Randstad aimed above the target, compensating manually for bullet drop. When one fighter broke cover, he fired. The shot struck. The distance was later confirmed, just over 2,100 meters. It became the longest recorded U.S. sniper kill in Afghanistan. The margin for error was measured in meters. Wind drift, time of flight. The bullet remained in the air long enough for doubt to exist after the trigger was pulled. In April 2012, in Helmand Province, 2 Australian sniper teams engaged a Taliban commander at a distance of approximately 2,800 meters. At that range, the bullet spent nearly 6 seconds in flight. Both teams used Barrett M82A1 rifles equipped with Schmidt and Bender optics. GPS confirmed the distance, spotters confirmed the hit. No one knows which sniper fired the fatal shot. Identity dissolved at that range, only the outcome remained. That record stood until 2017, when a Canadian sniper surpassed it using a different rifle. But the pattern was already clear. 5 of the 20 longest confirmed sniper kills in history were made using Barrett M82 variants. These were not anomalies. They were the logical result of combining extreme energy with extreme distance. Before moving toward the final and darkest chapter, there was one more story that revealed something else about the rifle. Not its lethality, but its dependence. Don Cook, a Marine Corps veteran, worked customer service at Barrett Firearms when he received an unusual call. A Marine unit in Afghanistan was experiencing malfunctions with their M107 during an active firefight. Gunfire could be heard in the background. The problem was simple and dangerous. During maintenance, the ears of the lower receiver had been bent, causing feeding failures. Without seeing the weapon, Cook diagnosed the issue. Over the phone, he instructed the Marines to use the bottom of the bolt carrier to bend the ears back into place. Within minutes, the rifle was operational again. The Marines thanked him and returned to the fight. Cook later described it as one of the highlights of his life, helping a unit in combat from thousands of miles away. By this point, the rifle had proven itself beyond doubt, technically, tactically, logistically. But the same qualities that made it indispensable on the battlefield were about to create a problem no one had planned for, because the battlefield was about to change again. The rifle did not disappear after the wars. It remained in service, refined and standardized. The United States Marine Corps continued ordering it through the 1990s, and in 2002, the Army formally adopted it as the M107. Lighter materials, improved buffers, and suppressor-ready brakes followed. The weapon became easier to deploy, easier to maintain, and easier to integrate into modern units. By then, its reputation was unquestioned. It was no longer an experiment. It was a system, and that is when a different problem emerged. The rifle was legal for civilian purchase in most American states. Expensive but accessible, and access created a pathway no one had planned for. Through straw purchasing, criminal networks recruited buyers with clean records. Rifles were bought legally, moved toward the border, then smuggled south in parts or whole. Serial numbers were removed. The weapons were reported stolen. In Mexico, the balance of power shifted. Police forces were not equipped to face a rifle capable of penetrating armored vehicles or downing helicopters. But the cartels were. 50 caliber rifles were used in ambushes. Police helicopters were shot down. Convoys were attacked. Assassinations followed. The weapon became a symbol of cartel dominance, leaving the military as the only force able to respond in kind. In 2021, the Mexican government filed a $10 billion civil lawsuit against multiple American gun manufacturers, including Barrett. The case argued that these rifles had become preferred cartel weapons and that manufacturers knew how they were being trafficked. A year later, the lawsuit was dismissed. The rifles remained, and the consequences remained with them. Meanwhile, the U.S. military began moving on. A new multi-caliber precision rifle was selected, chambered in .338 Norma Magnum, designed by Chris Barrett, the son of the man who started it all. The .50 caliber was quietly pushed back toward its original role as an anti-material weapon. Father and son had both designed rifles adopted by the military, a rare achievement. And a strange one. In 2004, California banned 50 BMG rifles. Barrett responded by refusing to sell to or service any California government agency. He also developed a new cartridge, the .416 Barrett, to legally bypass the ban. The rifle's story did not end with a single law or a single war. It fractured, adapting to each new boundary placed in front of it. A weapon born to destroy machines had moved through history, step by step, until it began reshaping societies instead. And once that line is crossed, there is no way to draw it back.